I did it on gasoline. And then I don't have to go shut it off.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming out tonight, or today, rather. Even with everything being uncertain and most things closed and all that, I'm glad that everyone could make it. So, as many of you know, because I've given this talk before, these talks are free, but we do accept donations in the back. And I hope that you all have a very good time.
Thank you. I'm going to take my mask off if it's okay. I think people will hear me better. I am vaccinated, so. And it's nice to be here after 1.6 inches of rain in my house. So I just live outside Grand Marais. So what we're going to do this afternoon is I'm going to take you on a tour on a book that I'm writing, actually mostly written. And there's a lot of pieces that I'm not going to talk about. So if there's something that you would like to ask me a question about that you seem to think we might be able to go in that direction, go ahead and ask. Because it's a little bit, when you give a presentation like this, it's a little bit odd because you realize, oh, I'm leaving out this good spot, or I'm leaving out this good chunk. So if you have questions, maybe we'll retrieve some of those. So I'm going to talk about a couple, and this is a picture of them. It actually was taken in 1928. And the tie-in for all you folks here is Mrs. Linkletter, or Chikuis on the left, is from Lac La Croix originally, and spent most of her adult life on Basswood Lake. And her husband, John Linkletter, comes from basically from Canada, and his family, Hudson Bay, James Bay, Winnipeg, and basically everywhere due north of us. And he ends up marrying Chikuis in Basswood Lake, and they live on Basswood Lake roughly from 1890s to their deaths in 1933 and 1934. But otherwise, they'd be talked about in a way that people might think about Benny Ambrose or Dorothy Muller or actually the whole Basswood Lake Anishinaabe community, all of which were, for different reasons, more or less driven from their homes about that same time. So, okay. So, hopefully these people were pretty remarkable folks in their own right. So it's kind of special to put them together. John on the left was a game warden, and fairly interesting game warden because you have what people would make out to be an Indian arresting a lot of white men. And at that time, that didn't go over very well. By my counting, he assisted at least 15 scientists from the University of Michigan, University of Minnesota, University of Illinois, and a number of individuals as well. And we'll talk a bit more about it, but for those of you who are Sigrid Olson readers, he appears in Sigrid Olson's, most of his books, in a reference or two. So he's kind of a mentor to Sig Olson. Mrs. Linkletter, or Chikuis, is related to people that names Lac La Croix people that you probably recognize, the Connors being, Sophie Connor being one. Mrs. Linkletter and Sophie Connors were first cousins. Although it's difficult for me to figure out exactly what the relationship is because Chief Blackstone, if you've heard that name, he was the leader of Lac La Croix in Oklahoma at the time. He had 3 wives. So doing genealogy in somebody else's family with 3 wives and then sisters of 3 wives is kind of beyond my mental capabilities. Okay. So if you do research on Native Americans, indigenous people in this part of the world, you get pretty used to inexact dates. Her birthday is roughly 1872. And we do know exactly when she died. And according to a number of her friends, she died of a broken heart after her husband died. John Linkletter, he was called Jack by some, was born in a place, I'm gonna give a quiz now. We're gonna go into Canada and I'm gonna do some geographic tests here for you guys. Fort Alexander, Manitoba. Anybody know where that is?
Not where it is, I think it's
You-
Manitoba.
Okay, so there's one big river system that comes into Lake Manitoba from the east. It's flowing from east to west. That is, believe it or not, the Winnipeg River. And where it enters Lake Winnipeg is a place called Fort Alexander. So it'd be due north of the town of Winnipeg, probably about 100 miles. So that's where he was born. I won't do that to you too often. His family comes, they're actually Orkney from, Orcadians from northeastern Scotland, the islands. And 3 generations of Hudson Bay folks on one side, on his maternal side, about 5 Hudson Bay Company family. And this is a picture of Moose Factory, one of the bigger posts on James Bay in 1854 when Jack Linkletter's great-grandfather was there. One of the really wonderful things about doing research is it takes you places that you would never go otherwise. This is from the HBC, the Hudson Bay Company Archives, but it turns out one of Linkletter's great uncles was one of the first indigenous visual artists in this part of the world. And this is just an example of it. Although it's pretty interesting, you'll see clothing that you're probably familiar with from sort of our part of the world, but then this is a Cree woman's hat. They're very distinctive. So this would be the tribe due north of Anishinaabe or Ojibwe people. So another surprise in this was the Linkletter family is tied in with the Louis Riel Rebellion. Okay, who knows the Louis Riel? A few people? Okay, this was the attempt in Manitoba, largely in Saskatchewan, where indigenous people decided they're going to start their own government, and they did. And they created a whole council of how to do fair elections. They did an election, and Louis Riel, who was a Métis or half-breed, as they were called at the time, won the election. But the Canadian government did not take too kindly to the idea of an indigenous government in Manitoba. And among other things, there's books written about this. They sent a whole army contingent to crush the Riel Rebellion, which, by the way, the whole army regiment went right through the Quetico, right north of us. The Dawson Trail, if you've heard of the Dawson, that's what that was initially was put in, was to get Worsley's troops from Toronto to Winnipeg, or Red River it was called, to crush the Métis at the time. And on this one, Jack's uncle participated in that rebellion. So, on the wrong side, I think, but nonetheless. So, and this is the Dawson Trail that I was just mentioning. So it goes through the Quetico, basically from the northeastern edge of the Quetico, right down to the southwestern edge. And it goes right through Sturgeon Lake and comes out of Lac LaCroix. And it was a big, big deal. I like to call it sort of the Canadian Oregon Trail with boats. And all the lakes had boats and steam engines on it. So if you were traveling, you would go from one portage, and if it was a big lake like Sturgeon Lake, then you would get on a steam engine and go all the way down to the next portage and get on and go on like this. And if anybody's ever been to Pine Portage, which is just on where Pickerel Lake comes down, where you come right out of park headquarters in the Quetico, and then the next big lake is Sturgeon Lake. There's a place there called Pine Portage. And this is remnants of the old steam boiler that was there from the old vessel that was there. And this is what the Hudson Bay Company posts look like. And the reason I'm torturing this is where Jack's dad worked. His last job for the Hudson Bay Company was right in the middle of the Quetico. So before the Quetico, think Hudson Bay Company. Okay. So a lot of things to figure out in this biography, and there was a lot of sort of false leads that were put in place for different reasons, and just a lot of family history that was pretty garbled. And the way that happened was there was a whole generation to basically die all at the same time. Actually, there was 3 generations in the 1930s. And then the younger kids were cut off from learning what was happening before that. And then pretty fanciful stories got made up, such as Jack's father left and went back to Orkney and left his Indian wife in this part of the world. Jack's dad's family had been in the New World already for 4 generations. Going to Orkney would be really odd because he'd never been there. So there's all kinds of funny things. The other thing is, Linkletter is the most common name in the Orkney Islands. And William is the most common given name. So I had William Linkletters coming out of my ears trying to figure out who was who. Okay. So, most people here, I'm assuming, know about the Powell family. And so this is Charlotte on the left, and here, and this is Clara Linkletter on the right. And Clara made everything you see there. This was from a postcard in Ely around 1918, something like that. But it's really quite interesting. Actually, it was a little later than that. But this is when fur coats were fashionable. And this was the one thing that, Babe Ruth was strutting around in a fur coat at this time. That was, to show his wealth. Well, this was one of the things that indigenous people could do here pretty easily. So they're strutting around in a better coat than Babe Ruth, if you want to think of it at that time. And then Clara made this. And what's interesting here, if you guys are interested in Anishinaabe beadwork, is there's a succession here showing this is done on a loom, where you get the geometrics where it's set up on a loom. And then this comes later, the freestyle, the floral design that most people are familiar with. So if you look at it, you can oftentimes tell which is older. And this is a transition time where basically it's shifting from the geometric into the floral design. Some people will say that geometric stuff is not Ojibwa, and they don't know what you're talking about. So, they'll say it's somebody else, but that's not right. So, little Canadian history here. The idea of Métis is that it's a different culture group than just the 2 halves. So half-breed was used in a really horrible sense, but it was basically a European dad and an indigenous mom, right? And the child from that would be a half-breed. But what happened in Canada for a whole bunch of reasons is they created their own culture with the T. And they created their own flag, they created their own government, they tried to fight the Canadians with their own language, their own dress. So there was a creative mixing and making of a new group, if you will. And this is where it really gets interesting to me. Canada recognizes Métis as an indigenous group, different than Indians as we do. So Canadians actually have 3 indigenous groups: Eskimo or Inuit, Métis, and Indian indigenous people. We only have 1. So it gives you a sense of how those categories, how arbitrary they are. At least it throws into, wait a minute, how can you have Métis just in Red River and not have it down here in Grand Portage or wherever? So anyway, and this is an interesting photograph, just, it's from the Harvard Museum, and I'm currently in an argument with Lee Jameson whether that's Linkletter or not. But you find photographs in really strange places. Okay. So John and Cheeky Wiss had 2 daughters, Maggie on the left, and this is the woman that made all the stuff that you were just looking at. And Maggie ended up dying under pretty strange circumstances, and there may have been abuse involved, and there may even been worse than abuse. And the man responsible for that fled to Canada, and she ended up dying shortly after childbirth, and was buried nearby their house. And this is one of the grave houses from the time. And one of the most disheartening things in finding out about this was how there was a tradition of pilfering grave houses in this part of the world. And it got so bad that actually the Canadian Rangers, one of their duties was to stop pilfering of grave houses. So it's just a different mindset that you would go in and knock them down, do whatever you're going to do, and then start taking things. So anyway, let's go ahead. So Linkletter, this is a picture of, this is from a state publication, by the way, which is kind of interesting to think that a state conservation magazine would do this. And this one really tickles me because the 2 savages here are playing with stereotypes, and they know what they're doing. They're messing around with. They're on a VIP trip with the mayor of Minneapolis and a whole bunch of businessmen from the cities, and they're basically pulling a prank. So eating fish heads, that was disgusting to the mayor of Minneapolis. So of course they made a big deal out of it. Let's go ahead. I bumped into the Linkletters on Isle Royal first, and then basically had traced them back here. But then my only other advice to you guys, if you ever try to do genealogical work with indigenous folks, is terms like grandparents. That's basically an honorific title. That doesn't mean that they would be your grandparent. So this one stumped me. Jack Linkletter's grandfather, excuse me, I almost said the wrong word. Why would he be going to Isle Royal and paddling there? And he wasn't. It was his great uncle. So you just got to get yourself into a larger genealogical sense of things. And that's the man on the left. Okay. Now I'm just glad I'm not in Ely when I show this slide, because when I did this in Ely, we spent an hour on this slide. I never could get anybody off of it. And this is sort of, to me, sort of the primitive GIS at the time. This is from 1960 at Mr. Trigg. And what's really cool about this, and you guys probably already figured it out, but look at all the wild rice beds. That's what this pinkish color is. And there was a huge native community on Basswood. You get a sense of it. The Linkletters and 3 other families were down here. The biggest settlement was right up here. And just right in here, this was a huge population group. If some of you are long-timers, I could ask the Sandys this. They maybe have heard of the name Chosa, but the Chosas were on this side of Basswood, heading towards our direction. So for almost 20 years, Jack worked logging. And what happened then is Indians got the most dangerous jobs, the ones that, and the job on the upper left is loading these logs, and Linkletter is actually on the top of the pile there. It's got to be quicker feet, or you wouldn't live through it. One of the more or legendary things that Jack did was, and I think it's mostly true, although his wife Chiquiwis gave birth to a daughter on Poplar Lake, here in the Gunflint side of things. They're traveling all around, and she developed an illness, and he ended up carrying her into Grand Marais, which she was a pretty big woman, but that was the way it was. And supposedly a doctor in Grand Marais helped her out. So, pretty renowned for his feats. He would often end up guiding individuals, and when Isle Royal was being investigated, whether it should be a park or not, he took a guy around, and that's a picture of Jack on that little sea stack there. This is Jack on the right, and this is his boss. And one of the things that his family brought into this part of the world, at least in the Ely, was they started making parkas. And you can see the parkas that they were making, and I can't find any antecedents to that. There was an elderly woman in Ely that said the Linkletters were the ones who brought parkas to this part of the world. And I tried to torture the Wintergreen folks with this concept that they should be naming their parkas after Linkletters. I haven't gotten very far yet, but I'll keep trying. So this is just a couple of pictures from that trip where they left Winton or Ely and they went to SAG. This was in the 1920s. And they did it 2 years of running, and then a third year they did a base camp. But there's a lot of accounts of this. Okay. That's another picture of that, coming down the border route. And what happened on the third year is the businessmen that came along kind of were know-it-alls. So the wardens kind of got together and decided they'd basically pull a massive prank on them. And one of the things that they did was they convinced him at night that there was a lynx nearby Brule Lake, and he was going by their campsite. And so they had 23 businessmen shooting at tin can and a table where it's over one of the openings that are supposed to be lynx size. That was the first night. Then they went to bed. Those that had pistols went to bed with the pistols, and those that didn't asked the cook for knives. So there's 23 guys from the cities sleeping with pistols everywhere and knives. And the second night, Jack made this lynx out of poster board, and then they pulled it along the shore, and they went out and blasting away at it at that time. And then Jack stood up and he basically made this speech in Anishinaabe that they translated, the other game wardens that, Jack was trying to speak to something. And anyway, they had these guys just totally in their palm of their hands. And then they started feeling guilty about it. On the third day, they finally let him in, and they were worried someone was going to get hurt. But anyway, Jack was a prankster. One of the things that happened out on Isle Royal, he ended up doing kind of a guiding business out there, and this is a railroad brochure, believe it or not. And the railroads were delivering tourists to Duluth to get on steamers, go out to Isle Royal. And one of the favorite trips was for them to take them over the island. Okay. Not a big guy, about 5'10", and he did step on a fisherman's scale, so I know exactly how much he weighed, 150 pounds, so he wasn't a particularly big man. Okay. One of the things that was happening both in mainland here and Isle Royal was basically, there was a whole thing happening with moose. This is when brainworm first hit this part of the world, except nobody knew what brainworm was. So what was happening is there was moose with huge amounts of ticks on them, and then they were also behaving strangely. They were, apparently it affects them, and they the moose move to the right and then get very tame. And so moose were dying in this part of the world. On Isle Royal, their numbers were going like this. So there was this whole discussion in regional newspapers, what is going on? And one of the things that Linkletter and his patron did was, I would call it today citizen science. And what they did was basically, they chased moose from a canoe, and they gauged the behavior and health of moose. One summer they did 300 cases of that. So there's diaries and there's pictures of them chasing moose. And then on the top picture, this is, when science is just getting going, they're identifying the plants that they're eating under the water. That's what that is a sample of what moose are eating. This is Linkletter in the back. And one of the things he used to like to talk about was the disappearance of caribou here and on Isle Royal. Here a little earlier and then a little later on Isle Royal. So he would always be on the lookout, and they would only been gone about a year or two from Isle Royal when they found these antlers. Mrs. Warren, by the way, was the first woman regent of the University of Minnesota. Okay. This is Isle Royal as a guide, and he would do particularly pancakes. Some of you folks maybe have seen me talk about this in a different, but this is plankfish. Did you ever done plankfish? So it's an early version of that. And this is Jack here, but they don't make cats like they used to. I mean, that's just great. Okay. And this is Linkletter with Frank Warren, Alice Warren's husband. And I always like the picture on the left because I spent my life dealing with OSHA. I don't think that's an OSHA-approved ladder arrangement there. So I just try to give people a taster of some of the things of why scientists would flock to them. And that's one example of that. Okay. So Sigurd Olson traveled with Linkletter at least 6 times that I can identify. And as I mentioned, wrote about him in his books. But what he also did was, Sigurd Olson did the first scientific estimates of the wolves in this part of the world for a master's thesis, University of Illinois. And guess who his #1 informant was? Jack Linkletter. So they had quite a relationship, and it showed up in a variety of ways. When Linkletter died, Sigurd Olson gave the eulogy. And after Linkletter died, Sigurd Olson named the Isaac Walton League chapter after Linkletter in Ely at the time, which is an interesting phenomenon to name an Isaac Walton League after an Indian in 1934. Okay. And this is, for me, a thrill to see a letter from Sigurd Olson to Aldo Leopold saying, get Linkletter as a guide. I mean, does it get any better than that? It's kind of like do everything in your power to have Jack Linkletter guide you, whatever that means. Are you supposed to do in other guides or what? So this was got me started on the picture on the Linkletter research. I first saw this picture and I said, who is this guy? And what the heck is he doing? And it turns out that there was an archaeological expedition that he ended up guiding for, and then they were very wealthy individuals, and so they gave him $100 bill and a top hat. That was his payment for. And then in the lower picture is Chiquiwis, and then what would be Chiquiwis's dad, and they're fooling around with the mandolin and the top hat. Okay. So one of the most bizarre things, when Linkletter died, actually it was about a month later, there was a full-page obituary in the Star Tribune, which is pretty unusual, I think. And there's a number of interesting things in there, but just the fact that, and I started, I don't know if any of you guys are members of newspaper.com, but if you do that, it's a great way of wasting time during COVID time. I found obituaries for Jack in 26 different states newspapers. It was covered basically by the Associated Press. And this is really an interesting canoe because it's actually a birch bark canoe, and then they put canvas on it. I've never seen anything like it, and it still exists today at the Isle Oil Museum. Okay. And they actually have a film from the 20s of Jack mending the canoe, and this is really old time stuff. I know you've seen this is sort of classic birch bark canoe stuff. But if you got a big gouge or a leak, and you would stop and you'd pull the canoe out of the water, and then you would melt pitch into the hole. So that's the same canoe that was in there. He's melting pitch into canvas that's on top of a birch bark canoe. And they're like, ugh. This is from a National Geo magazine, and Mrs. Linkletter had quite a business selling souvenirs. So she was a Midi-Weavian practitioner, which is the primary religious tradition of the Anishinaabe people. It's botany-based, it's health-based, it's based on trying to heal people, and she was one of those. So she was a plant person, she knew plants very well. And one of the things that made them so well remembered is basically they gave virtually everything away, and it was just customary Anishinaabe value at the time. If I'm here and I'm Anishinaabe and I'm wearing a coat, and you say I like that coat, guess what? I'm going to give you the coat. So there was all kinds of people that remembered them from that kind of thing. So one of the really amazing things is Mrs. Linkletter's cedar bats still exist. There's 10 of them, and this is an example of them. So this is made from the inner bark of cedar, like we have white cedar. Probably most of you have it on your property, and you take the rough part of the bark off, and then you strip the inner bark, and then you make it uniform in width, and you weave it. And you also dye it with various colors, whatever your colors. And she dyed everything from plant-based stuff. This was called Ojibwa linoleum at the time, because it was what was pulled. You've seen the birch bark lodges. This was put on the ground to insulate, to keep people from getting cold, touching the cold ground. And then once everybody basically moved into cabins, it didn't have a function anymore. But what started happening is people started buying these things because they're beautiful. That's actually a green color that's faded. Okay. And this is Mrs. Bougie in Ely. The pictures of these being made are very, very rare. So they were just hand woven, just under a tree. And this is an example of what it would look like when it was being made. Okay. Mrs. Linkletter was multi-talented, so beadwork, these are examples of things she made. On the fancier side of things, most of what she wore was just a plain moose-hide mock, and I like to call them like high-top moccasins, not the low ones like this, but they could go up fairly high on the calf, which is pretty obvious if you're walking around in this part of the world. It would protect your leg a little bit more. Just another example of things she made. She made this whole dog sled trace here, and this is at the Winter Carnival. She made that. So it wasn't purchased. The actual collar was made out of moose hide around a ring of willow, and then stuffed with moose hair to provide a little bit of padding, and then leather around. And then that's what you can see here and here. But all this leather work she made for this. And this individual was a WCCO radio personality at the time, for those of us old enough to remember sort of the heyday of WCCO. And she actually wrote a fictional book about the Linkletters called The Earth Never Tires. Her name is Dara Aldrich. Fairly interesting person in her own right. Okay. So this is just a little bit more on the canoe. I should really probably ask you guys about paddles up in this part of the Big Dove area. Over in the Ely Way and Basswood and Lac LaCroix, the paddles would be, finish them like that fairly often. And it's a fairly unusual way of finishing the paddle. And so you can, just like canoes have a certain shape and they can tell you who made it or where it's from, paddles have the same thing too. So once you start figuring out shapes of paddles, then you have some idea where the maker was from at the time. So I mentioned the parkas. And then we ended up with another family, actually his game warden Wass. They bought a fishery on that oil. Okay. All right. And some of you have seen this photograph before, but it's just still kills me. What's a dog doing in the canoe? So, questions, thoughts, comments? Yeah.
What's a slooper?
Slooper?
Yeah.
A slooper is basically a sailor.
On a sloop?
On a sloop, yeah. Yeah, that was, they were called that in the Hudson Bay Company. And 3 generations of the Linkletters were sloopers. Yeah?
I'm curious to know, her leaving, what did she use to dye the cedar bark?
Oh golly, I was hoping somebody wouldn't ask me that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I just said my question.
Let's see what I can remember. She used, I think for a dark blue of all things, she used roots a lot, not so much the plant parts of the plant you would see. So she used things like yarrow and something else to get a blue. There was one person that said that Anishinaabe people did not make green-colored cedar mats. Frances Densmore, if you know who she is, and half of Linkletter's mat, and Mrs. Linkletter's mats have green in it. I'm going, wait a minute, that's not right. Actually, I can't remember off. It was usually those were usually harvested beforehand, and then they were boiled, and they were made ready, because when you went into the woods and you harvested the cedar strips, you had a narrow window, because with each day it would dry. So you either had to put it in the water, or keep it in the shade, or get the dye into it right away. So those mats were probably the actual, once everything was in place, things were dyed, and frames up, those were all woven basically in a day. Yeah.
How do they make the strips of cedar so uniform?
Well, by the way, you can still find these, and I bet there's some on Border Lakes country. So if you're paddling along, and you probably won't be near a campsite, I don't think, at least. But on Ioway, I was just looking at them, and they're obviously old cedars now. But usually, right about your knee level maybe is where the bottom is, and then I'm short, but it'd be above my hand kind of thing. And you chop it with basically an axe, and then you take the outer bark, and then you more or less yank it. And if you see these things, they start closing up as you get higher, and that's kind of the diet. Generally, they did it two ways. They either took partial from the tree, or they actually would chop the tree down and harvest the whole thing. But on our road, there's 2 or 3 that are left, and this is one that are harvested from. And the other part is, we're sort of in the epicenter of cedar bark making in Anishinaabe country. And guess what? It's because there's all the cedar that's here. So, and you asked something else that I didn't answer.
Shape the uniform.
Oh, that was just a matter of, that's how I got started. They'd start rough, and they'd take the strips, and then you basically out where the cedar are, and then you'd come back, and there'd usually be a process, usually done with a scissors, to try to get them uniform. But if you looked at those, you would find that they are not uniform, and that's the whole other skill is she's got different colors. Sometimes she's got 3 different colors going, and then she's got to do it uniform so they don't sag or look weird. And then the strips are not, it's organic. You're not going to get them perfect. So you work on them, and then you'd have to, while you're putting these together, it's the kind of the old thing. I got a narrow one, I got to put a wide one next, kind of thing. So I'm not a weaver. I don't know if people are weavers here. But the math involved in this, particularly on repeating that and then the width, this is really quite a skill to put all that together.
Did harvesting in part kill the tree?
If you did the partial harvesting, like I was describing, no. If you did, if you cut the tree down and you're using the cedar for some other reason, like building a canoe, then yeah.
Out of curiosity and all your research, being that Linkletter, was probably raised by whites, I would guess. Basically, I think of like Paul, Sagan, he was married to Mary Otterdale, and he couldn't understand her native language, and she, for the best part, couldn't understand English very good. But I'm wondering, Linkletter, how did you relate in your studies with, the Ojibwe community as a whole? I mean, I know we got to be pretty famous through all his dealings with, but was he pretty well looked on favorably by, like say, all the tribe up at Blackwood Croy and Basswood?
I think I can answer that. Well, first of all, his mother was Anishinaabe.
Yep.
So he was born in Fort Alexander, but his mother was from Lac Seul, if you know where Lac Seul is. So Steve, I'm gonna answer this partially a different way. This is a time when people were speaking multiple languages to get, so Linklater could speak English, Cree, Anishinaabe, and the T, and some French. And he could write in English and some French. So at that time, there was just the linguistic ability of folks in this part of the world was really something. As far as the Mrs. Powell not speaking, not recognizing English, it was pretty classic for Indian women at the time not to speak with strangers. And I don't know how much that aggravated that sense that they didn't know English. Mrs. Linklater was exactly the same way. No one ever caught her speaking English. But most people that spent time with her knew that she knew more than she let on. And it was a kind of a survival technique, because oftentimes there's a whole contingent of people out there that realize, there's a great biography right now by Paul Buffalo, had his growing up in the Leech Lake and area, and just there was a whole group of people that said, don't speak to whites because it's dangerous. You know, they take your land, they take your da-da-da. The less you talk to them, the better off you are. So I wonder about some of that, whether, and I don't know the Powell situation that well, but there would be a lot of inertia for her not to speak English. Let's put it that way. Mrs. Linklater's dad came from the Sault Ste. Marie area, and he was a very fluent French speaker. So he was a very multilingual, and it's hard for me to imagine with that kind of skill level that they're not learning English, at least survival English. Yeah. Long answer to your question, but there was a whole.
So was he accepted?
Oh, yeah, he was. Yeah.
He got the day of America.
Yeah, and the thing is, so we're talking about a period where there's some of the massive changes that we all know about are just starting to happen. But for example, it was very common at this time where an Ojibwa woman would marry a man from another band. That was actually customary. So when we start talking like Lac-La-Croix or Boy Sport, that means nothing. They were just blended. Same with Lac-La-Croix has a very strong connection with Grand Portage. The Caribou family is the best example of that. But that's because the men were going and they were marrying women from elsewhere. And the same was true for like the Jack Powells and the John Linklaters and John's father-in-law, who was from Sault Ste. Marie. The men were often accepted into the maternal communities, if you will. And that was true for Linklater and his dad and for the Powells as well. There's more accommodation going on than you think. Yeah.
If Mary Otter Tail was a cousin of Mrs. Linklater, am I correct in that?
Yes, but I'm not gonna be able to tell you if it was a first or second cousin. Yeah.
Did the families get together regularly? Was there closeness? I saw the two women there in costumes.
Yes, they're, the Ottertail family and, well, the Ottertail family, it's just as I said, they were all intermarried. The Ottertail family was very deeply connected with the Caribou family from Grand Portage. And Paul Caribou, who was, Steve, you would remember Walter Caribou? His dad was Paul, and Paul would trap and guide with Linklater. So a lot of these boundaries that we talk about, you know, like Vassar Lake people being different from Sag people, there was much less of that than you know. And Charlotte, like the picture that I showed with the regalia and the beaver coat, she was actually born in Cowell Bay, Sturgeon Lake in Quantico. So there's much more of a blending going on. We tend to talk about bands as separate and geographically, But when you go back a little ways, you find out, it's like Grand Portage and Fort William people, they were at one point the same. And border and religious affiliations split those two groups apart. Yeah,
Recently, the paper had an article about these maps that were coming home to
Yeah.
Grand Portage.
yeah,
Was this a picture of one of those
yes,
maps?
yes.
Okay,
Yes.
interesting.
There's actually 10 that survived from Mrs. Linkletter. And then Grand Portage, where I used to work, has about 8 of their own that were done by Grand Portage people. There are maps made by Charlotte that I showed you in the Smithsonian. And if you looked at them, you would say she and Mrs. Linkletter were doing the same thing that. I mean, so that's why I think one of the coolest things I stumbled into is this was really the home or capital of cedar map making and for all of the Anishinaabe world. And it just so happens that a lot of them survived.
It's also interesting that Jack Powell was Scottish and so was Linkletter.
Yeah. Yeah, they knew of each other and they spent a short amount of time together. It's Sophie's dad, Ed Connor, which is was a basswood trader. He and Jack actually traded further north. And some people, at least like Sophie, in her oral history, said that her dad brought Jack down to this part of the world. Not sure if that's true or not, but Ed Connor and Jack Linkletter were, we'd call them associates today, or colleagues, or. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for coming on.